It was the dry season in the savannah. The golden grass had withered, and acacia trees stood far apart like lonely shadows on the land. In the middle of an open clearing, where there was no place to hide, 7 hyenas formed a tight circle. At the center stood a baby lion, barely 2 months old, spinning in fear, crying desperately for its mother. But no lion answered. Only the cub's helpless cries floated through the hot air. The alpha hyena, a large beast with a deep scar over its left eye, leapt forward. Its sharp teeth slashed toward the cub's paws. The baby stumbled back, straight into another waiting hyena. In an instant, it latched onto the cub's tail. It was a classic hyena strategy: immobilize the prey, then attack together. Just then, a jeep roared through the bushes. Ranger Mark Thompson had seen enough. He slammed his foot on the gas, the jeep crashing through branches as he drove straight into the clearing. Before the vehicle even stopped, Mark jumped out, fired a shot into the air, and the savannah exploded with sound. The hyenas flinched, but this was no ordinary pack. They backed off only a short distance, about 20 meters, growling and cackling among themselves. Mark quickly aimed his flare gun and fired at the alpha's feet. A loud blast of red light hit the ground, forcing the pack to hesitate. Only then did the alpha bark a command, and the hyenas reluctantly retreat into the tall grass. But Mark knew they weren't far. They were watching, waiting. In the clearing, the tiny lion cub trembled. Its tail was injured, but not badly. Mark approached slowly. The cub didn't run. Instead, it walked to Mark and pressed its small nose against his leg, crying softly, begging for help. Mark looked around. No mother, no pride. A lioness never leaves her cub behind. Something was terribly wrong. He grabbed his radio. "Base, this is Mark. I've found a lone cub in the eastern sector. I'm searching for the mother." He checked the ground for signs: pressed grass, broken branches, droppings. Soon he found fresh tracks leading northwest. He began to walk, and the tiny cub followed him, struggling to keep up but refusing to be left behind again. After 20 minutes, they reached a dry riverbed. Across it stood a herd of Cape buffalo, 30 of them, including several huge males. They spotted Mark and the cub instantly. The nearest male lifted its massive head, sniffing the air. A lion cub meant danger. Where were the adults? One male stepped forward, lowering its sharp horns. The cub pressed tightly against Mark's leg, terrified. Mark remained calm. No running, no sudden moves. He gently placed his hand on the cub's head and slowly stepped sideways. But the buffalo stamped its foot and pretended to charge. The cub tried to flee, but Mark held it close, steadying his breath. Another male prepared to charge. But then a buffalo calf stepped out from the herd. Curious, innocent. It stood between the cub and the angry male as if to say, "Don't harm this little one." The herd froze. Their maternal instincts took over, and no buffalo could attack now. Taking the chance, Mark carried the cub and slowly detoured around the riverbed until they were safe. They walked for another 30 minutes. Then came a low rumble. Lions. The cub perked up and ran ahead joyfully. Behind the baobab trees appeared a pride of lionesses and cubs. The baby ran toward them, thinking it had found home, but the nearest lioness flattened her ears and growled. Another stomped her paw. They rejected the cub instantly. It carried a different scent. A young male lion, new leader of the pride, stepped forward. He locked eyes on the cub. He knew this was not his offspring. He charged. Mark jumped in front of the cub, arms wide. The male stopped 3 meters away, staring into Mark's eyes. He recognized the ranger. A man with weapons. A threat to the pride. Instinct said, kill the cub. Logic said, stay back. His pride watched him. He could not look weak. He growled once more, then turned away. Mark backed off slowly, carrying the cub. This was the wrong pride. He returned to where the tracks had split. He had taken the wrong path earlier. But before he could choose the next trail, he saw them. The scar-faced hyena and its pack watching from a nearby hill, only 50 meters away. They began descending, cackling with hunger. Mark grabbed the cub and checked the ground. There, a faint trail. The tracks of a single lioness. It was unusual. Lionesses never travel alone, but he had no choice. He followed the faint trail as the hyenas creeped closer behind them. After a few minutes, the cub suddenly sniffed the air and bolted forward. Mark ran after it. They reached a small clearing under a wide acacia tree. There lay a lioness, huge, but unmoving. The cub cried and rushed to her desperately. Mark checked. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was weak, eyes clouded. Then Mark saw the cause. A poacher's snare was wrapped around her leg, anchored to the tree. The more she fought, the deeper it cut. She hadn't abandoned her cub. She had been trapped, suffering alone for days. Mark radioed urgently. Base, send the vet team now. 30 minutes later, James and Sarah arrived. They sedated the lioness, cut the snare, and treated her wounds. The cub cried, trying to reach its mother, but Mark held it gently. It's okay. They're helping her. After an hour, the lioness's breathing steadied. Her eyes focused again. She saw her baby in Mark's arms and let out a soft, trembling sound. Mark set the cub down. It stumbled toward its mother and pressed into her neck. The lioness inhaled deeply, recognizing the scent she had feared she had lost forever, and softly licked the cub's face. Mark returned for a final check. The mother and cub were healthy again. The baby ran to him, rubbing its nose against his leg. The mother lioness approached slowly, no limp left, and then bowed her head to Mark. A wild lion bowing to a human. A gesture of pure gratitude. Mark felt his eyes filled with tears. In 30 years of working in the savannah, he had never experienced anything like this. The mother lioness lifted her head, looked deeply into Mark's eyes, then turned. Side by side, mother and cub walked back into the golden savannah. Their silhouettes slowly faded into the shimmering grass. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. More life-saving stories are on the way.